Well, I thank my friend from Georgia for yielding, and I rise today in strong support of the rule governing these pieces of legislation, and in particular the underlying legislation, the regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny, or REINS Act, H.R. 26. And, Mr. Speaker, during the first two terms that I've served in this Congress, the most common question posed to me by my constituents in central and eastern Kentucky is, what is the biggest surprise that you've confronted as a member of Congress? And regrettably, Mr. Speaker, the biggest surprise that I've discovered as a member of Congress is that Congress is no longer in charge. Regrettably, unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats in the executive branch run the country. Most of the laws that are enacted in this country at the federal level come out of unelected bureaucrats in administrative agencies in the executive branch. And members of Congress, even though we're elected by the American people to be the lawmaking branch under Article 1 of the Constitution, we can't stop it. We can't stop these rules and regulations. And so I am proud to consistently have supported the REINS Act because it reasserts the powers of this body and this Congress under Article 1 of the Constitution, which provides very simply as follows. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. What does this mean? The most important word in Article 1 of the Constitution is that first substantive word, all, implying that none of the legislative powers should be in any other branch of the federal government, and it certainly shouldn't be exercised by the executive branch. This, of course, we know as the non-delegation doctrine, the principle that Congress may not and should not delegate its legislative power to administrative agencies. The non-delegation doctrine forces a politically accountable Congress to make policy choices rather than leave this to unelected administrative officials. And yet, what we have seen over the last several decades, and especially over the last 8 years, has been the rise of an unaccountable, out-of-control administrative state. Over time, powers that are vested exclusively in Congress by the Constitution have been increasingly and unconstitutionally claimed, assumed, and exercised by the executive branch. And now, unaccountable, unelected bureaucrats decide how you work, what goods and services you can buy and sell, and what you can do with your own property, all without accountability at the ballot box. So this state of affairs is fundamentally in conflict with the foundational constitutional principle that Congress alone possesses the federal legislative power. Look, this has enormous economic consequences. It's costly to our economy, and I don't have to go into that. The estimates are $1.8 trillion in cost to the American economy. But the bigger issue is this, is that none of these rules from these agencies have been approved, let alone even considered by Congress, even though they do have a profound impact on the economy. And so the measure we're considering today would simply require those regulations with the greatest economic impact to be approved by both houses of Congress prior to their implementation. And this has two positive outcomes. First, obviously, it has the effect of blocking costly rules. But secondly, and more importantly, it will no longer allow members of Congress to delegate their constitutional responsibility to the executive branch. And I will conclude with this. I heard my friend and the gentleman from Massachusetts make the argument that Congress is not even interested in these regulations and that we're not capable of seriously reviewing these rules. This is about making sure that experts with specialized expertise in the executive branch review and promulgate these rules. But what are we doing here? If that's really what we should just turn out the lights, lock the door, and leave, and give the keys to government to the executive branch. We had a Democratic administration over the last 8 years. We're going to have a Republican administration coming. This is not about Republicans and Democrats. This is not a partisan issue. This is about the integrity of the institution of Congress.
The time
Let's
of the
stand
gentleman
up for
has
the
expired.
Congress and pass the REINS Act. I yield back.
Reserve.